Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome into yet another amazing webinar hosted by our partners, Conga. Super excited this afternoon to learn about those top 5 strategies for the software implementation in enterprise. Welcome in, everybody. Today we are joined by Jordan. He is the Global Director of Cloud Alliances with Conga. Naveen, VP Business Systems, and Clayton, Senior Director of Global Rev Ops. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Great.
Awesome.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, on that note, Clayton, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and let's dive in.
All right, sounds good. Well, this is my my first hosting a webinar on this platform, so hopefully I get this right. Let's see if we can get things going here for you.
Okay.
All right, so hopefully we see the slides. Looks like you do on my screen. Hopefully you do on yours as well. So yeah, excited to be here with you guys today. Talk through top 5 strategies for software implementation in enterprise. Again, here's our lovely faces. All 3 of us are working at Conga. We've been here working together for a little while, been through a number of these projects together. So hopefully we have some good insights to share with you guys today. We're going to kind of go through this and take 3 different lenses at the topic. We're definitely going to talk about how to work with IT. We're also going to talk about our 5 strategies, ways to make sure that you're getting the right tech stack, which is more than just working directly with IT. And then we'll wrap it up with sort of a high-level playbook view of that. Obviously, the first place to start, I think, with any good webinar is a little bit of humor. Our goal today is to figure out how to not be this guy. I can personally say I've done this myself in my career and it didn't turn out well. Throwing the ball over the fence is never the call. So working with the IT department is a strategy that we can all develop a little bit better skill set in. And why not start off with our IT specialist on the phone, Naveen, and our first strategy. Naveen, I'll pass it to you to walk us through.
Thanks, Clayton. And we are still working on it. So, okay. So I started my career over 25 years in IT. And I have worked in some of the largest organizations. And I always felt that, hey, I mean, IT is one of the hardest working teams in the company. And we also want to do the same thing for the company and organization. Why there is a trust deficit? And when I look back, those days I could feel why, because most of our effort and capacity used to spend in keeping the systems live. So for example, the metrics or matrices those days we were used to capture that, hey, your system is up 99.99%. So I could very well understand that business wanted to do something faster and IT did not even have the capacity to do it. But now, like, if I look at today where all the systems pretty much like, we are running such a, large IT and I don't maintain any server. So I don't have to go to Clayton, my business partner, and say that, hey, we have to spend so much capacity there. And one thing I have learned over the time that build the trust, because if we don't build the trust, then there is always going to be some hesitation, and that is going to slow down all of us. So Clayton, if we could move to the next slide. Yeah. So here we are just trying to give a scenario that we had a recent situation where one of our top business partners was looking for something. They were having some problem and they felt, because we know that we have always been approached by various vendors and they come in and they pitch and they ask that, hey, we can solve your problems. And when those problems were put before me, I took it, I looked into it, all the applications we have, and I tried to figure it out that, hey, do we have other means to solve that problem? And I went back, I explained that like, maybe this is some way we can solve the problem, and I got a positive outcome of this, and we were able to save thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. So one thing I would like all of us to take out of experience, that when we have a trusted partnership and when we are openly able to share the problems we want to solve it together, it goes a long way. The other point, and again, this is for everyone, I would like to share that most of the time we get the design that, hey, like, I want this field here, I want to create this table. And what it does, that it gives us not an optimal solution. So my other experience so far has been that please share the problem with your IT partners and work together to come up with a solution. And this goes a long way.
Yeah, I'll just chime in a little bit here at the end and add my 2 cents that, as I said on that first little joke slide there, I have been guilty of kind of throwing things over the fence at the IT business partners and saying, hey, figure this out for me. It's never once worked out well. Establishing that strong working relationship with your IT team is absolutely critical, and maintaining it right throughout the entire project, from figuring out your scope all the way through celebrating the go live at the end. And also, quick apologies if the slides jump back and forth there, figuring out my my technical side over here. See, it doesn't want to advance for me, so there we go. All right. So moving on into our second strategy here, Jordan, I think this one we'll hand over to you.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here and talk about strategy number 2, which is all around unveiling existing partnerships to optimize your software implementation strategy. And when I speak partnerships today, I'm staying within the scope of just cloud providers or hyperscaler partners. So just keep that in mind. But let's get started. I'm going to start with a little bit of education and context. Organizations use cloud providers like AWS, Microsoft, or Google on this slide for scalable and cost-effective computing power. So these platforms will provide on-demand access to a number of services, which allow these businesses to innovate faster, build products, optimize products, scale resources, reduce upfront infrastructure costs, and also benefit from the security and the reliability of that established cloud infrastructure. So in essence, these cloud providers are helping businesses to focus on their core competencies while leaving the complexities of IT infrastructure management to experts or just trusted market leaders. And more than 90% of businesses today leverage cloud computing from one or more providers. So it's not just a tech buzzword. It's really fundamental in the shift of how companies are operating and innovating. So when these businesses are customers of cloud providers, they generally pay based on consumption. And the more computing or cloud consumption they have, the higher their bill. And there are programs in place with these providers where you can essentially get a bulk discount for cloud services. So if your organization is using a lot of AWS or Amazon Web Services, this program can help to save money. So since you're buying in bulk, instead, the more you use, the more you save. So it makes it a little easier for companies to manage costs and scale their cloud resources while benefiting from robust and secure infrastructure. So let me make that a little more real. Let's pretend with very fake numbers, just for the sake of an example, that your company is going to leverage AWS and they decide to make a 3-year, $10 million cloud spend commitment. So they believe that they're going to leverage about $3.33 million worth of cloud each year for 3 years. And they're going to make that commitment to AWS. In return, AWS will provide a discount for this commitment. So in this fake example, we'll say that AWS is going to give a 10% discount to this company by signing up for this commitment and this program. So in essence, now this company is going to get $11 million worth of cloud services or consumption over that 3-year term for the cost of $10 million. So with AWS in particular, this program is called the Enterprise Discount Program. And major cloud providers all have their own acronyms. Of course they do. AWS, refers to it as EDP. Microsoft calls it their Azure Enterprise Agreement. Google calls it their Google Cloud Platform Enterprise Agreement. So each of them kind of has their own version of this program. So the first step in strategy number 2 is finding out if your company has a cloud spend commitment to a cloud provider in the formal sense of an EDP or equivalent. Typically speaking, IT and finance usually are a great place to start when trying to find this information. That could be your CIO, IT managers or directors, cloud architects, your CFO, finance managers, procurement and vendor management teams, or even account managers of the Cloud Alliance like myself in my title, for example. So those folks usually have a good understanding of what that agreement as a customer is with that cloud provider. So you can kind of have an idea from those folks. So now with all that context, you know what these partnerships mean and how they work and where you need to go to find out what your organization's relationship looks like. It's important to mention that each one of these providers on the screen has their own cloud marketplace. So these marketplaces are a lot like the marketplaces you and I as consumers leverage, but these ones are built more for businesses. So cloud customers can search, purchase, and deploy a number of software or applications or services from their marketplaces. So they offer this diverse ecosystem of not just their services, but also third-party solutions that seamlessly integrate with or are built on their cloud. So their customers can go to the marketplace with confidence to find services and solutions that are trusted, secure, reliable, enterprise grade to satisfy the needs of whatever pains it is they're trying to solve for. And additionally, when they check out, that purchase is consolidated and billed within their next invoice. So from AWS Marketplace, that's going to be included in their next AWS Cloud consumption invoice. For Azure Marketplace, that would be on their Azure invoice. For Google, again, that would just be on their Google Cloud invoice. So really, ultimately, these exist to simplify and accelerate that procurement process for their cloud customers. So why did I just spend so much time talking about EDP and the cloud marketplaces? I promise I'm getting to the point where I can tell you how to use your partnership. When cloud customers are part of these programs, their purchases in the marketplace for software can actually count towards or retire that annual cloud spend commitment. So for example, Conga is available in AWS Marketplace. So let's say an AWS customer is looking for options for an e-signature solution. Rather than having multiple e-signature providers across various departments like they currently have, they want to have one solution for their entire organization. So they need this provider to allow for multiple deployment options to serve all the different use cases across every department. They need enterprise grade features that are comparable to their current providers. They need white labeling options. And ideally, this solution would be built on AWS. So this customer can go to AWS Marketplace to look for any e-signature providers that are listed there. They can find Conga Sign listed in the marketplace. They can evaluate the software and decide that it's the right solution for their needs across that entire company. So They can then go into the marketplace. They can add Conga sign to their cart. They can check out by billing to their AWS bill, which is paid for by that dedicated annual AWS spend budget that I just talked about with that EDP program. So with that set aside AWS cloud spend budget, they have not only retired their commitment with the cost of that Conga software, but they also got software with that exact same budget. So the really powerful part of this is that Infosys recently reported that only 47% of the current cloud commitments are utilized, which is believed to equate to $300 billion in corporate cloud commitments that remain untapped. So that puts a lot of companies in a position to be able to leverage these partnerships to fund their tech stack optimization. So with the current macroeconomic climate, it is becoming increasingly difficult to get budget for new technology, or projects are getting put on hold or pushed back. So if you can, by understanding what your company's commitment is and where they're at, you can use this lever to help your organization not only fund your software or tech stack optimization, but also meet the cloud spend commitments when they're underutilized. So that is strategy number 2. So with that, I will hand it over to Clayton to chat more about strategy number 3.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. So yeah, super important to spend the dollars that you've already committed in the current economic climate. So moving right along, our third strategy here is application rationalization. So Naveen, maybe I can kick this one over to you to get us started, and then I'll kind of fill in as we dive into the weeds a bit.
Sure. Okay. So application rationalization is very close to everybody who is in IT. I mean, we have seen our employee cost, software cost, everything is increasing every year. And at the same rate, IT budget is not increasing. How do we still manage the cost and bring innovation to business? And that is one of the most important things when you are consistently working on application rationalization. So here I would like to bring 2 things. One is around, particularly when you are going through merger and acquisitions, you inherit many redundant applications. And what I have seen in the past, even though you are trying to retire or decommission some of those applications, you are unable to do that. And that is somewhere you need to be very particular, because that is going to give you a lot of money back to the budget, where you can do so many things. And here, Clayton and I particularly, we had a situation where we had to go through merger and acquisitions. And basically, you'll be surprised to hear at Conga, we had 5 or 6 Salesforce instances. Can you believe? In addition to that, we have 8 to 10 Atlassian instances. We had multiple middleware instances, and we had 2 ERPs. And in last two and a half years, as a strong IT business partners, we are able to decommission most of these applications. And we very proudly say today that, hey, we have 1 CRM, we have 1 ERP, we have 1 Atlassian instances, and we have maybe 2 middleware, one for real-time, near real-time kind of integrations, and 1 for ETL integrations. And we have saved little over $3 million, and that has gone to the bottom line. So this is particularly when you are in a situation going through merger and acquisition, it's very important to make sure that we decommission some of these applications. The one hidden cost I have seen most of the time we don't realize if we don't decommission some of those applications and some of the business processes are still running there, it takes lots of time from our business and operations team, where they have to now, in order to perform their job, they will have to go to multiple applications and then figure it out that how do we get things done. So it makes things more difficult. And Clayton, I would like you to come in and share some wise experience you have here.
Yeah, absolutely, Naveen. So economies of scale goes beyond just spending and getting the most out of your dollars spent on the software. It also needs to be looked at through the lens of how many groups of people, how many individual processes are you trying to maintain across your operations teams? As a revenue operations leader, one of the things that I am constantly battling is the decision between, do I create a process? Do I stand up a team? Do I invest the time in my human resources to be able to execute what we need to be able to execute for our business? Or do I go and try to figure out if there's a software that will enable me to build that same process in more of an automated or software assisted fashion? So economies of scale is certainly about getting the bang for your buck out of your dollar spend on your software, but it also is about making sure that you're using your resources, your human resources, effectively and efficiently. And analyzing the existing vendors that you have is the best place to start to figure out whether or not you can combine both the benefits of consolidation to a single vendor and also consolidation across those multiple manual efforts. So as Naveen mentioned, right, at Conga, one of the things that we have done, which is pretty common in the enterprise space, is mergers and acquisitions. These are going to be common situations when you're going to have multiple different softwares coming together under one roof. And oftentimes what needs to happen is you need to take a little bit of time to kind of let them coexist, figure out what are the pros and cons of each of the softwares and each of the processes that might be coming together. But then ultimately what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to identify, okay, we've merged these organizations together. Now we want to invest in our human equity and make sure that our employees are getting the best out of the systems available. So you identify your duplicate instances, you identify the stronger of the softwares that you have when you have multiple doing the same thing, and you set yourself a plan to consolidate these vendor solutions, ideally under one or fewer vendors. That's really what's going to drive consistency across the software experience, reduction of the human capital that's needing to be burnt to run these individual processes. And to me, as Naveen mentioned earlier, in the case of Conga, we went from 5 different Salesforce instances down to 1. And that represented a savings, in the several millions for us. So no small feat. I think that probably took us about 2 years from start to finish. It was maybe a little bit longer than we had originally planned for and ideally had set out to achieve. But the payback has been significant, both in terms of cost savings and in terms of our teams across the company being familiar with a single system and a single set of processes. And it really helps drive efficiency across your entire business in terms of how do you actually go and do the daily job, and also how do you then report on your KPIs and your success metrics. Naveen, anything you want to add on to application rationalization before we move on to our next one?
No, Clayton, you covered it all. Just to add, more applications. What is going to happen that you need the skill set to maintain those applications as well. So it adds a lot of additional cost to IT, and it slows down all of us. So as Clayton mentioned, more streamline our processes are. It is going to improve the efficiency, and it is going to help us move faster.
Yeah, well said. Human capital is just as much a part of your software expenditure and working with IT considerations as the actual check that you're going to write for the software.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to our fourth strategy for effective strategies in working with IT and designing your dream tech stack. So leveraging vendors with a suite of offerings. Apologies in advance if this sounds a little sales pitchy. It's kind of because we work for a company that fits this mold really well. So I'm going to use us as the use case, but we're not the only one. One of the trends that we're seeing in the software market is more and more companies are converging and bringing together similar offerings. I'll pick on DocuSign as a primary competitor of Conga, right? DocuSign forever has become synonymous with e-signature. But one of the things that they're doing recently is they're expanding into contract lifecycle management and document generation. So things that naturally pair with signature capability. Conga is very similar to that in that we have brought to market a revenue lifecycle set of solutions, which is the kind of thing you want to be looking for when you're trying to identify, okay, do I already have vendors that I can consolidate more of my softwares into, or maybe do I want to go and embark on a journey with a new vendor partner, and will that new vendor partner be able to just solve one point solution for me, or will they be able to help me on a broader subsection, or maybe the entire revenue journey, something along the lines of what our revenue lifecycle is. So finding those vendors, whether they already exist or whether you're looking at new ones, who can do more than just solve the one point solution. Conga works in the revenue lifecycle. Again, I'm a revenue operations leader. So the things that are near and dear to my heart are, how do we drive efficiency in our business from the point that you've identified a lead? How do you get that into a quote? And then once you've got a quote, how do you generate that into something that you can share with your customer, your prospect? And then let's say that they like what you've shared. How do you go and do the back and forth and have the negotiations and be able to update, your document as you go? And then hopefully you get to something that looks good, and now you want to execute that. So in that small but important life cycle, you've gone from generating your document. That's one software. Conga sells CPQ. There are other CPQ vendors out there we compete with. Salesforce is one that comes to mind. And then you've gone into CLM, contract lifecycle management. I mentioned that DocuSign is a competitor to Conga there, but they don't really handle the configuration, the pricing, the quoting. So you wouldn't be able to consolidate your costs between those two legs. And then ultimately get to your final order that you want to get executed. Well, you need to sign that. And in the modern world, I can't remember the last time I signed a contract. I've done it, but it's been a long time. Pretty much everything is done through e-signature these days. So identifying those vendors that can offer multiple solutions will make it easier for your users, your operators, your sellers to be able to get familiar with a single solution set that integrates well and seamlessly moves from one stage to the next, to the next, to the next. That is the kind of software investment that drives massive efficiencies, reductions in overhead. And to some of the points that Naveen has been making, it requires fewer IT resources to maintain those systems. Instead of having 4, 5, 6 point solution systems that have to be stitched together through their own custom interface, you can have the same number of solutions, but they come built to already interface with one another seamlessly. So that massively reduces your IT spend. So this one is very similar to the prior one in that vendor consolidation, when you're looking for enterprise software, is critical to bringing down your costs and recapturing some of that human equity in your company, right? Looking for those vendors that can solve multiple problems, that can integrate seamlessly within their own solutions, and also that have pre-built connectors that can integrate well to the other vendors that are adjacent to them. It's not all about trying to find, the one vendor that will solve all of your solutions, but when you're looking at vendors, understanding do they just give me the point solution, or do they give me the pieces on either side of that point solution so that it makes my IT team's job easier to integrate with, whether it's quoting into CLM or CLM into contract signature, or CPQ into your renewals process. So finding those vendors that can either do multiple steps or they can integrate well on either side will save you time, it'll save you money, and it'll make for much happier employees. Jordan or Naveen, anything you want to add on sort of the revenue life cycle suite from Conga and the strategy number 4 here?
So Clayton, I would just like to highlight one thing, particularly Conga. We are built on single data model. And that brings a lot of value we don't realize, or many people do not realize. Throughout my career, I have worked in integration space a lot. And think about it, when I look back in my previous organizations, where all these applications were not on the same platform, we must have added 10 or 15 integration points, multiple points of failure, too many support issues. And when we are here on Conga platform, you don't have to worry about that, hey, whether my opportunity data has gone to a CLM system or not to generate the right contract. Or vice versa with quoting, that, hey, did I receive the quoting data back in my CRM to run my forecasting? So all these things have become so much easier, particularly when we are on the single data model.
Absolutely. The single data model is fundamental for any of you who have been involved in the challenges of business reporting. You'll know that having a single data model across multiple systems is a game changer. All right, so we've got one more strategy for you, and I think Naveen and I are going to tag team this one because this one is near and dear to our hearts. If you haven't picked up yet already, Naveen and I have been through the trenches on a couple of software implementations and figured out how to work together. But this one is really about, once you've identified that software, whether it be through your consolidated vendor or you found that one cutting edge AI tool that you just have to have. Doesn't really matter whether it's a vendor you've already worked with or a new one. Super critical in evaluating software is making sure that you take the time in partnership with your IT partners and whoever the business owners are that are going to be impacted by this software. As an example, at Conga, I'm responsible for all of our tech stack that is involved from prospecting, quote generation, all the way through close of business. But then I have a customer success business partner who's responsible for then our renewal motion, which is critical in the software industry. So pulling together your business partners, making sure you have that sit down with the business owners and with IT, and really getting clear on what's the problem we're solving and how long is it realistically going to take us to do this. And then making sure that once everybody is clear on value proposition, here's the problem we're solving, here's why we need to do this, here's what it's going to cost, here's why it's going to be positive ROI to our business, and here's the timeline to put it together. Making sure that before you start down your project with IT, you start at the end and you ask yourself, what is our change management process going to look like? How are we actually going to get adoption in our company if we spend the money on this software, we spend the human resources, we spend the time, we put this thing in place? How do we make sure that we actually get the value out of it? Because I can tell you there's nothing worse than putting all those hours and all of that money into a software implementation only to get to the end and have the business reject it because they don't know what it is. They weren't involved in it up front. They don't have a sense of ownership. They didn't have a sense of input. So really understanding what your implementation timelines are going to be and what your change management process is going to be up front is going to make all the world of difference in how effective you are at setting expectations for leadership, hitting those deliverables, and making sure that the adoption of the new product is a positive one. So dive a little deeper into that, Naveen. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, so So before we go, get into these details, I, if you see, I mean, all of us, when anybody is coming, or even we go to the customers and we say that, hey, buy our software, and this is going to give you the strategic advantage. Now think about it. All of Conga customers, they must be using Salesforce as a CRM. Now, how are we really going to get most out of that CRM, and how are we really going to get the strategic advantage? And strategic advantage comes from the implementation and adoption that Clayton talked about. That we all have same software. How are we going to get most out of it? And that is one thing, particularly here, we are looking at Conga, that before we go and acquire a new software, new vendor, we are understanding end to end. And here, the ask was that, hey, we have to implement a new software. And what we do as a team, we strategize with business, and we are now starting from the end, that, hey, what is the end state of this, and then how can move backward to achieve that. And I would like to give you an example, particularly this whole generative AI stuff coming in the picture. And we had a situation where we were not getting the desired results. And then when we started thinking from the end that, hey, what is needed? Do I have all the data to reach to that result? And then how do we start capturing the data? So these are some of the things where we, business and IT, needs to work together to have the same vision, make sure that we are having creating the user journey. And if we bring all these things together, then we are really going to have a successful software implementation. So again, key takeaway or bottom line is that need to have very strong alignment with business and IT, and we cannot discount the human needs of any implementation. And particularly here, we work on user-centric IT. I am asking my team all the time that, hey, are you putting yourself in business shoes? And does it make sense to you if you have to run the business? And that is how we are trying to make sure that we are having better experience, better way of developing the software.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is important for all of you who are watching this, trying to identify some additional skills to identify and purchase the right softwares, is keep in mind that nobody knows your business better than you, right? You are the person who truly knows the ins and outs of what your team is doing, what are their needs, what are the outcomes that you're trying to drive through with this software purchase that you're considering. And what I have seen is sometimes when the business doesn't show up in partnership with IT, they say, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's the high level goal. Here is the software that we've identified that we want to go and purchase, right? Now, IT, help us implement it. If you don't continue to show up every single day and make decisions, clarify the direction, that project is going to fail. As the business leaders who know what your teams are doing, know what the outcome is you're trying to drive to, you have to prioritize getting on those calls, whether it's daily calls, bi-weekly calls, whatever the right cadence is, and make those decisions. And sometimes the steer co isn't enough. Yeah, the steer co is important to have the high level visibility. But in my own experience, the way to make sure that you have that consistent level of connection with your IT partners, that they're not going down a path you don't intend them to go down, and that you have the successful implementation you're looking for, is to make sure that you're dedicating that time necessary and showing up to help make the decisions. Because the IT teams that we work with are super smart, great individuals. They can do a lot of things for us, but that's their skill set. Their skill set is not running the business. That's our skill set. And that's where we need to come and partner with them and make sure that we have that handoff of knowledge so that what they're building for us is the right thing.
Yep. And I always say that unless business is there leading from the front with IT, we cannot have a successful implementation of any project.
That's right. Okay, so quick little playbook recap for you. We had 5 strategies we went through. Partnering with IT, right? Hopefully you're picking up what we're laying down here. Super important that as a business leader who has a budget, who wants to buy software, that your first stop is reaching out to your IT business partner and bringing them on the journey with you, explaining to them what you're trying to do. Believe me, the investment in that initial conversation will pay back multiple times over than if you'd skipped it. Leveraging your existing partnerships, as Jordan walked us through, all of the fantastic marketplaces that are out there where you probably have committed spend. Go and reach out to those key personas. Talk to your IT business partner. Talk to your finance business partner. Figure out if you already have dollars that are committed to spend. A lot easier to spend committed budget than go and ask for new budget. I think that one's a given. Application rationalization, right? It's about looking at the software that you already have and asking yourself, is there an opportunity to make this more streamlined, more efficient, more effective? Multi-solution vendors. Keep Conga in the back of your minds there. Vendors that are going to be able to take you through multiple stages of your revenue lifecycle are going to be a cheaper solution and are going to be able to scale and grow with you much better than individual point solution vendors. And last, not least at all, probably the most important, effective change management, making sure that you are partnering with your IT team and that you're bringing everybody on the journey from the beginning with an outlook to where is it that we're trying to get to and how do we work backwards from there so that everybody has a clear understanding of the role that they get to play, because not everybody plays all the way through the way you do as the business owner. So there's kind of the high-level review of the playbook. Jordan, Naveen, anything I missed in there that you guys wanted to make sure to super triple underscore?
I think it's just important with each one of these, we call out the time frame. So partnering with IT, just that's an evergreen thing. That's something you're going to want to establish and maintain with leveraging existing partnerships. Those are multi-year contracts, but you have annual milestones. So making sure you're evaluating that and looking at where you are yearly is really important. For application rationalization and multi-solution vendors, just reviewing that every few years so you can make sure that you are optimizing that motion. And then the change management is really going to be unique to each project. So just keeping in mind the timeline for each of that.
Yep, I think Clayton, you covered it well, and Jordan. So I think I'm good. All the wisdom has been imparted already.
Awesome. All right. Well, then with that, we will move to our final stage of the webinar day. Happy to stay on and answer any questions. We'll take a look in the Q&A if you've got them. Please plug them in there, and we'll go through whatever questions we have. Do I stop presenting at this point? I don't know.
I think so.
All right.
All right, guys. So looks like we had a question from the audience from Christina. It's to Clayton and Naveen. When kicking off the project with IT, what are some good questions to ask so both parties really understand each other and can work together successfully?
Yeah, great question. I'll ask sort of the questions that I ask of my IT business partners. Usually the questions that I'm asking are, first and foremost, do we already have a solution for what I'm trying to do, right? Do we already own this software? And if we don't, then I can move into questions like, okay, are you familiar with this vendor that I've identified as a potential solution? Do you have any other vendors that you think might be worth looking at? And then importantly, what does your bandwidth look like? What might an implementation timeline for something of this size and nature be? Are we talking about something that we're looking for next quarter, or is this next year? So those are the ones that I start with. Naveen, anything from your side back?
Yeah, so we try to understand from business side the end state. What is the objective? What are we trying to get out of this? Do we have KPIs that we can start measuring to success of this project? One of the most important things we have started doing very frequently is having the whole user journey and whole end-to-end map. And what happens, it forces all of us, IT and business, to have that same vision that, okay, this is where we are starting, this is what we are doing, and this is how the end state look. And as Clayton mentioned in previous discussions, that any time spent upfront, it saves us so much time where we don't have to do the rework, and we look good when we deliver the projects on time.
A tool that I'll just throw this one in, a tool that I really like that Naveen and I have become quite good at working with together is the Gantt chart. Using a Gantt chart up front really gives it's a good tool that works for multiple different types, right? For the visual types, you can see it. For us auditory or kinesthetic types, you can actually kind of work with it. Putting together an initial Gantt view of, kind of what the phases would look like to actually bring something to a successful go live is a fantastic tool. And I highly recommend it up front because it allows you to get a visual of what really the phases are. And, you can build buffer in up front. It's easy to do. So that's one tool that I particularly like.
All right. We had another question from Christina. Also, how do you handle objections from the team when implementing a new software?
And you want to take that one?
I mean, yeah. So what happens, so one thing we have realized, and we have come a long way. So I remember, when I started my career, at that time, we used to have business requirement document, maybe 20, 30, 50 pages. And by the time you start the implementation, halfway through, the requirement changed. And then you have to, again, you will deliver something and business is not going to be very thrilled and they are going to use. So now moving to this agile methodology, it is helping us a lot because we are getting feedback very frequently, and any feedback coming, we look at with objectivity. And for example, we are halfway through, and Clayton comes in and say that, guys, we need to change it this way. We are not a kind of rigid IT where we say that, hey, we are not going to take it. Because in the end, if business doesn't get what they need to run the business, what good we are delivering. So to every objection, we look into it objectively, we work together, we trust each other, and then we make the final decision.
Yeah. I would say if you're getting a ton of pushback from the business and adoption, you probably missed some really important steps at the outset. And that was going to those business users, going to those business. It's more than just going to, the me's, the people who own the software, right? I have to go and turn around and actually go and ask my frontline salespeople, hey, I'm going to make this change to our CPQ tool. Does that work for you? Does that actually make your life easier? Is that something that you want to see or something you don't want to see? So getting that upfront buy-in and commitment from the business, from the people who are actually going to use this software once it's fully implemented, super, super important, right? That will eliminate 80% of those sort of objections to adoption when adoption time comes. I think the other 20% is inevitable. There are always going to be people who maybe they weren't listening or they weren't paying attention or they didn't understand. And the best way to overcome those objections that I have found are twofold. One, really making sure that you have a strong partnership with whatever your enablement function is those people who are going to help you pull together the education so that the users can quickly climb the learning curve, understand the new software, understand what's in it for them, understand why it's better for them, better for the company. So having a really strong partnership with the enablement group and bringing them in, usually you want to have them in your initial kickoff call, and then they really start to ramp up about halfway through a given project to make sure that when you're going live, they've already started the trainings and enablement. And then there's always going to just be a couple of conversations. I've not found a solution for this yet. I don't think there is one. Some people, you just got to get on a call with them and say, hey, help me understand where you're at, what your objections are, walk through why the new software is a benefit to them and the company, or just the company if it doesn't benefit them directly. 99.9% of times, that personal one-on-one conversation helps them get over whatever their objection is.
I couldn't agree more. Guys, that looks like that was all of our questions from the audience. So we're about 10 minutes of time. If you do have any other questions, we'll leave it open for a couple more seconds, see if anybody else comes in with any more questions. But in the meantime, Naveen, Clayton, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today and helping our community understand how to implement these new softwares. It's always a challenge, but Clayton, I have to agree with what you said, making sure that your teams are aligned, asking them, hey, will this help you? What better people to answer those questions than the ones that are experiencing these pain points or that will be utilizing the software? And then obviously working with your IT teams to make sure that this is something that realistically you can implement. I always find new tech and they're like, yeah, that's not going to integrate with our CRM. It's like, okay, well, just kidding. Never mind. So I do think that all of the points that were discussed here are super important. Also, guys, if you'd like, go ahead and drop in your LinkedIn's, or we can do it post-event. Connect with these guys, ask them questions, ask their advice, opinions. I'm sure they welcome it. But with that being said, guys, I think that's about it for today. So thank you, everybody, so much for joining us and our audience. We always love seeing you guys. And again, thank you, Naveen, Clayton, and Jordan for taking the time from Conga during your busy day of implementation and helping us host this incredible webinar.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
So, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Bye.